In Meadville, Pennsylvania, a forge has been running without stopping for 140 years. The same family, the same city, the same American steel, heated and hammered and dipped in the same trademarked shade of blue that has been on every pair of pliers that has left this building since 1956. Most of the companies that made tools in this town are gone. The machines were sold. The buildings were torn down or converted. The jobs went overseas. Channellock is still here. And the story of how it stayed is not the story most people expect. Meadville, Pennsylvania used to be called Tool City. That was not a nickname assigned by a chamber of commerce looking to attract tourism. It was a description of what the city actually was. A precision manufacturing center in northwestern Pennsylvania that produced more tools per capita than almost any comparable city in the country. Drill bits, metal stampings, hand tools, die castings, the kind of industrial output that built the infrastructure of the 20th century. At its peak, Meadville's manufacturing economy supported thousands of families in a city of roughly 15,000 people. Most of that is gone now. The factories closed in waves through the 1980s and 90s as American tool manufacturing shifted offshore in search of lower labor costs. What remains is a smaller city with a large industrial memory, high school students making videos about their town's legacy for a Smithsonian traveling exhibit, and one company that never left. Channellock employs over 350 people in Meadville as of 2026. They are among the largest employers in Crawford County. They are celebrating their 140th year in business. And every pair of pliers they sell was made in those two buildings on South Main Street. The company started with a blacksmith named George Dearment and a very specific frustration. In 1886, Dearment was a farrier, a craftsman who fit horseshoes, living in Evansburg, Pennsylvania, a small community near what is now Conneaut Lake. He could not find farriers' tools that met his standards, so he built his own. He spent his winters hand-forging hoof-parers and nippers in a small factory, loaded them onto a wagon when the roads cleared in the spring, and sold them town to town across the region. When he ran out of tools, he sold the wagon and bought a train ticket home. He would do it again the following year. The business eventually outgrew the wagon. It outgrew a series of progressively larger facilities. By 1923, it had moved into a 33,000 square foot plant in Meadville, at what is still the company's address today. Dearment's two sons had joined him. The product line had expanded to include nippers, wrenches, and hammers. The company was called Champion Dearment Tool Company, and then, in 1932, everything changed. Chief Engineer Howard Manning came to work with an idea. The standard pliers of the era had a fixed pivot point, which meant that a single pair of pliers could only grip within a narrow range of sizes. If you needed to grip something larger, you needed a larger pair of pliers. Manning's insight was geometric. What if the pivot point could slide? He designed a curved tongue-and-groove mechanism, a curved ridge on one jaw that fit into a corresponding groove on the other, that allowed the two halves of the pliers to be repositioned relative to each other along multiple positions. The jaws could be set wide or narrow without increasing the distance between the handles. One tool could grip a half-inch bolt and a 2-inch pipe fitting. The leverage stayed constant regardless of which position was selected. Manning filed the patent in 1932. Patent number 1,950,362 was granted in 1934. The company named the tool Channel, after the channel and lock mechanism at its core. What happened next is one of the more unusual events in the history of American manufacturing. The Channellock pliers became so widely used and so widely imitated by competitors who produced similar tools under different names that the brand name started to function as a generic noun. Plumbers, mechanics, and electricians began calling any pair of tongue-and-groove slip-joint pliers Channellocks, the same way people call any facial tissue a Kleenex and any photocopy a Xerox. The company recognized the legal danger immediately. If your trademark becomes the generic term for a product category, you can lose the trademark entirely. It becomes public property. Champion De-Armament Tool Company responded by changing the company name itself. By 1964, the company was officially Channellock, Inc. They had turned the threat into an asset. The brand name was so embedded in the language of the trades that the company renamed itself after it rather than risk losing it. That innovation and the legal strategy around it are remarkable, but they are not the most remarkable part of this story. The most remarkable part is what happened in the decades that followed, when the economic logic of American manufacturing started to collapse. Through the 1980s and 1990s, foreign manufacturers, primarily in Asia, began producing tongue and groove pliers and other hand tools at a fraction of the cost of domestic production. American tool companies faced a choice that looked, on paper, like no choice at all. Offshore the manufacturing or accept that competitors would undercut your prices until the business was no longer viable. Company after company made the offshore move. Brands that had been American-made for generations became labels on imported product. The factories closed. The workers were laid off. The institutional knowledge, the specific expertise that took decades to develop in the people who ran the machines and did the heat treating and understood the steel, dispersed and did not reconstitute. Meadville lost factory after factory during this period. Channel 0CK watched it happen to their neighbors, and they stayed. The decision to stay was not made once. It is made continuously, year after year, by a family that has been running this company for 5 generations. John De-Armament serves as president and COO. His father, William, is CEO and chairman. His brother, Ryan, leads sales and marketing. The company is not a publicly traded entity with shareholders demanding quarterly earnings optimization. It is a family business in a small Pennsylvania city that has decided, as a matter of identity and not just strategy, that moving the manufacturing overseas is not an option. In their own words, it is not the easiest way, but it is the right way. The production process in Meadville starts with American steel, high-carbon 1080 steel, sourced domestically. The billets are heated and forged into shape. The jaw surfaces undergo radio frequency hardening and laser hardening to create cutting edges that maintain their precision under professional use. The pliers are polished, inspected, and dipped in liquid PVC that is then baked solid to create the blue grip. Even the Channellock blue is proprietary. The same shade, trademarked since 1956, has been on every pair for nearly 70 years. The company manufactures over 75 different types and sizes of pliers and ships to more than 45 countries worldwide. They are producing on a global scale with a fully domestic footprint. The economics of that position require the company to charge more than a comparable pair of imported pliers. The market has decided, consistently, that the premium is worth paying. The final detail about this story is the one that connects it to the original frustration of a blacksmith with a wagon. George De-Armament started building tools in 1886 because he could not find tools that met his standards. The company he built still operates on that same premise, that the standards matter, that the people matter, that the city matters. In 2023, a group of Meadville High School students made a video about what their town used to be and what Channel 0CK still is. The Smithsonian selected it for a traveling exhibit about rural American manufacturing. It is not a coincidence that the students chose this story. Channel 0CK is what Meadville has left from the era when Tool City was not a memory, but a present tense description. Whether that story continues depends on the same thing it has always depended on: buyers choosing to pay for what domestic manufacturing costs. That choice is available every time someone reaches for a pair of pliers. If this story stayed with you, subscribe. There are more of them. And most of them are hiding in the places that used to make.